All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, glory, and honor unto Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Harakah HaKodash. Double honors unto the apostles and elders of James Great Millstone, and a sincere Shalom to Akim, bringing out this word in diligence and in truth. And this lesson is going to stem from the book of Second Maccabees, the 3rd chapter. I want to just get into the spiritual significance of what Heliodorius tried to do unto Jake and the church, and how those parallels are similar to what Esau is trying to do, to the spiritual body, which is the temple today, right? So I'm gonna go back from the KJV to the GNT. So I'm gonna start off at the top. It says, "Now when the holy city was inhabited with all peace, and the laws were kept very well because of the goodness or the godliness of Onias the high priest, and his hatred of wickedness," right? "It came to pass that even the kings themselves did honor the place and magnify the temple with their best gifts, insomuch that Seleucus of Asia of his own revenues bare all the costs belonging to the service of the sacrifices." So when we read this in the NLT, because the NLT, it's like the GNT, breaks it down a little simpler. But basically, Seleucus, it was getting an overflow of money, and that money was, being given for the act of sacrificing, right? So I'm going to read that again. Verse 2, it says, "The kings of Syria and Egypt honored the temple and presented it with expensive gifts. And King Seleucus, ruler of all Asia, even used to pay the cost of the temple sacrifice from the revenues he collected," right? Now continuing, it says, "But one Simon of the tribe of Benjamin, who was made governor of the temple, fell out with the high priest about disorder in the city. And when he could not overcome Onias, he gat to him Apollonius, the son of Thraces, who was governor of Seleucia and Phinis, and told him that the treasury in Jerusalem was full of infinite sums of money, so that the multitude of their riches, which did not pertain to the account of the sacrifices, was innumerable, and that it was possible to bring all into the king's hand." So Jake was trying to find, a way to ultimately gain himself, right, or direct that gain towards the king, right? Which it was ulterior motives within that, right? That was wickedness, right? Because the scriptures detailed that the money in that treasury was to be given unto the widows, I believe the widows, the fatherless, and belonged unto another man within that temple or within that community. And it's going to say his name as well. All right, it says, "But a man by the name of Simon of the tribe of Benjamin, the chief administrative official of the temple, lost an argument he had with Onias over the regulations governing the city market. At this time, Apollonius, sons of Thraces, was the governor of Greater Syria. Simon went to him and said that there was so much money in the temple treasury that it could not be counted. And since the money was not needed for sacrifices, it might as well be placed under the king's control. When Apollonius met with the king, he told him about the money, and the king ordered who? Heliodorius, the chief minister." Right now it says, I believe tax, or treasurer, right? It says, "The king chose out Heliodorius his treasurer and sent him with the commandment to bring him the foresaid money. So forthwith Heliodorius took his journey under a color of visiting," meaning basically under, he lied about what his motives or his intent was when he came into the cities, right? It says, "Visiting the cities of Seleucia and Phinis, but indeed to fulfill the king's purpose. And when he was come to Jerusalem and had been courteously received of the high priest of the city, he told him what intelligence was given of the money." He basically told the real reason as to why he was visiting. It says, "And declared wherefore he came and asked if things were so indeed. Then the high priest told him that there was such money laid up for the relief of widows and fatherless children," right? Because we understand that in our custom, we have a welfare system built for the widows, for the fatherless, right? The widows are the women who lost their husbands, right? Fatherless are those who lost their father, right? So these welfare systems, because what did the man do? The man was the head of the household. He was the one that was able to bring forth, majority of the gain and or salary into the houses. So without that head, the woman would have to, get into a particular craft, whether it be sewing, cleaning, so forth and so on, cooking, baking, whatever the case may be. But without that head, she was destitute of that increase, so to speak, man. Right? So these things were left for them, so they were still able to live, man. Says, then the high priest told him that there was such money laid up for the relief of widows and fatherless children, and that some of it belonged to Hyrcanus, the son of Tobias, a man of great dignity, and not as that wicked Simon had misinformed. Right? The sum whereof in all was 400 talents of silver and 200 of gold. Now when we go into the GNT, it tells us the weight of that gold and silver, right? Here it is, verse 11. It says, he also pointed out that the total amount was only 30,000 pounds of silver and 15,000 pounds of gold, right? He added that it was absolutely impossible that anyone should be permitted to take the money of those people who had placed their trust in the sanctity and the safety of this world-famous temple, right? So ultimately, Jake was nigher, nigher unto Yahweh Shemel Shai. So Heliodorius' plan by that king was ultimately to what? To rob the temple, Let's go into this word really quick, right? To rob or to steal. Oh, it's like that wasn't the word. Desecrate. I don't think I spelled that right. Desecrate. Right? It says divest of sacred character. Treat with sacrilege. Sacrilege treatment, act of diverting from a hallowed purpose or use. So that's what was trying to be done. Diverting the funds of the temple, right, from a hallowed purpose or use. And the use was what? Sacrifice. The use was to restore unto those that were widows, to restore unto those that were fatherless. So the money had a purpose of hallowing, man, right? So how does this relate unto our time today? Well, we're going to continue to read, but what we're going to see is, as the scripture says in the book of 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter, in the 3rd verse, I believe it's the 3rd verse. I'm going to grab it really quick. 1 Corinthians 13, it's like a 3. 1 Corinthians 3 and 13. And it reads, I'm going to start here at 11. I'm just get to the point. 16, right? It says, know ye not that ye are the temple of Yahweh by Hashem Yahushai, and that the Spirit of the Most High dwelleth in you? If any man defile the temple of the Most High, him shall Yahweh destroy. For the temple of the Most High is holy, which temple ye are. Matter of fact, I want to grab this in a blue letter so I can go into those words. It's 1 Corinthians 3, verse 16, verse 7. I want to go into defile. 1 Corinthians 3 and 17. This is for the word defile. G5335. It's like G5351. It says pithero. Right? It says to corrupt or to destroy. The temple was corrupted or destroyed when anyone defiled or in the slightest degree damaged anything in it, or if its guardians neglected their duties, right, to lead away a church from the state of knowledge and holiness in which it ought to abide, right? And we just read that it was what? Hallowed, right? So desecrating is to make it unhallowed, which is to corrupt, to perish, to destroy, to ruin, right? It says by moral, which really immoral influences, to deprave, to corrupt. And that's essentially what was happening back in that time. So we're going to read and continue to read what's going to happen. Because he is trying to do this unto the third temple, which is the body of believers, man. So let's read the consequences of what happened to this guy Heliodorius, man. Because Yahweh Shemel Shai doesn't play about his temple, about his men, about his people, especially those that believe. It's like not especially. He doesn't play about those elect, nor the 1/3, man. How do we know? And well, we're going to grab precepts, right? Matter of fact, I'll grab one now. This is coming from the book of Mark, the 9th chapter, and 42nd verse. And it reads, And whosoever shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, it is better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and he were cast into the sea. Right? So there it is. You offending one of the little ones is better that you had a large stone compassed around your neck and was thrown into the sea, man. Basically meaning what? That you drown. Right? Because Yahweh Shema Shai is going to recompense destruction or judgment unto those that offend these little ones, man. Let's go into this word offend. Salaki. G4624, it says offend, to put a stumbling block, to entice to sin, to cause one to judge unfavorably or unjustly of another. Says to make indignant, to cause one displeasure at a thing. Right? And that's what is going to happen when we continue reading. You know, let's go into this word displeasure really quick. Look up displeasure. It says annoyance, a feeling of annoyance or disapproval. And we're going to see what Jake did when these intents were shown by Heliodorius and what he tried to do. You know, to take that money, man. Matter of fact, before I grab that, I want to grab this precept in the book of Zechariah 14. It's like Zechariah 2. And this Zechariah 2 and 8. It says, for thus saith the Lord of hosts, Yahweh, after the glory hath he sent me unto the nations which spoiled you. For he that toucheth you toucheth the apple of his eye. Right? So we're going to read that in the NLT. It says, after a period of glory, the Lord of heaven's armies sent me against the nations who plundered you. For he said, anyone who harms you harms my most precious possession. Woo! So what does the Lord do unto those that harm his most precious possession? It says, I will raise my fist to crush them, and their own slaves will plunder them. Then will you know that the Lord of heaven's armies has sent me. So there it is. So let's keep reading. Now this is back into the book of 2 Maccabees 3. And I was 11. It says, and some of it belonged to Hyrcanus, son of Tobias, a man of great dignity, and not as that wicked Simon hath misinformed, the sum whereof in all was 400 talents of silver and 200 of gold, and that it was altogether impossible that such wrong should be done unto them, that had committed it to the holiness of the place, and to the majesty and inviolably, or it's like in the inviolable sanctity of the temple, honored all over the world. But Heliodorius, because of the king's commandment given him, said that in any wise it must be brought into the king's treasury. Basically saying, by any means we taking this, right? Just like how E is just going to try to come at the men of Yahweh Shema Shai. Basically saying what? Oh, well, these men are the new face of what we deem as, adversaries. Hey, we're going to go touch them. And the scriptures give a clear description of what happens when E, tries to come upon the men of Yahweh Shema Shai in the book of Isaiah the 59th chapter, speaking about that standard, right? So I'm going to keep reading and I'll grab that. It says, but the priests prostrating themselves before the altar in their priest vestments called unto heaven upon him that made a law concerning things given to he kept, that they should safely be preserved for such as had committed them to be kept. Right? So what did the priests start doing? They started praying unto Yahweh Shema Shai, man. Right? Calling upon the Lord. Right? But they understood it wasn't strength in their hands. And this fool Heliodorus came with some men. He came with basically a little army with him, man, to take the money. Right? And I like how the NLT, or it's like the GNT, breaks it down. It says, priests wearing their priestly robes threw themselves face downward before the altar and begged Yahweh Shema Shai to keep the money safe, since he had given the laws designed to protect the money that people deposited in the temple. It was heartbreaking to see the high priest. His face turned pale, revealing the agony of his soul, and his body was trembling with fear, reflecting the pain in his heart. And does not the scripture speak about the righteous crieth unto the Lord, right? We sigh and cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. So ultimately, this is what the priests were doing in the spirit, man. They were sighing and crying unto the Lord, for deliverance, for help, right? Izar Nawa, or it's like Izar Nawa, which is help me. Izar is to help. Naya, Izar Naya, it's like it. That's what it is. Izar Naya, to help me, right? It says people ran from their houses to join together in prayer that the temple might not be defiled, right? And we just went into that word defilement and desecrated, right? And it says the people ran from their houses to join together in prayer, right? And are we not joining a brick by brick to create forth the temple of Yahweh Shema Shai in the spirit? Stone by stone, with Yahweh Shai being the chief cornerstone. So the same thing is being done in the spirit. We're crying unto the Lord, right? And he sees the enemy coming. So we're going to read what he's going to do. It says, women wearing nothing but skirts of sackcloth crowded the streets. Young girls whose parents had never allowed them to be seen in public ran to the gates or to the walls of the city, or just stared out of their windows. And we know that's heavy, because young women, were put up for the purpose of marriage, man. The fact that they came out and was praying too says a lot. They were ultimately being seen, not in nakedness, but they were being seen, and praying, man. It says, and all holding up their hands toward heaven made supplication. Then it would have pitied a man to see the falling down of the multitude of all sorts, and the fear of the high priest being in such an agony. They then called upon the mighty Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai to keep the things committed of trust safe and sure for those that had committed them. Nevertheless, Heliodorius executed that which was decreed. So what? They started trying to move the money, man. Right? It says, but at the very moment, God, I want to go back to the KJV, man. It says, now as he was there present himself with his guard about the treasury, the Lord of spirits and the Prince of all power, there it is. Who is that, man? Yahweh Shai, caused a great apparition, so that all presumed to come in with him were astonished at the power of Yahweh and fainted and were sore afraid. So when we go into the book of Isaiah, the 59th chapter, it's 64, so like yeah, it's Isaiah 59, and we're going to go into verse 19. It says, so shall they fear the name of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai from the west, and his glory from the rising of the sun. When the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord shall lift up a standard against him. And Esau knows this, man. When he tries to come up against, the men of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, and lock brothers up, and be at brothers' residence with troops and however many soldiers, so forth and so on. Hey, the Lord is going to send forth that standard, man. Hey, and spiritual power is going to be released. Hey, the Lord can have, brothers be in that position and just teleport somewhere else, man. Or give brothers power. The options are infinite. We're dealing with the power that can't be bound. Our God, man. He can't be boxed in. Omnipotent, omniscient. The Lord does what he wants. And when he chooses to give his man power, guess what happens? A power is shown. That's why they're going to fear. See, Esau fears now, but in that day, his fear is going to increase. Because he's going to know the Lord is going to show forth his power through his men. Right? So we're going to continue to read what happens here in 2 Maccabees 3. Right? It says, for there appeared unto them a horse with a terrible rider upon him, and adorned with a very fair covering, and he ran fiercely. I like the way the GNT describes it. So let's go back. Right? It says, in the vision they saw a horse and a rider. Right? And it's beautiful that they say this, because when we go into the book of Isaiah, the 53rd chapter, it speaks about how Yahweh Shai is going to, the blood is going to be spilled up to a horse's bridle. That's what it reminded me of. It says, in the vision they saw a horse and a rider. The horse had a rich decorated bridle. There it is. And its rider, dressed in gold armor, was frightening. Suddenly the horse rushed at Heliodorus, then reared up and struck at him with its hooves. Heliodorus also saw two unusually strong and handsome young men, which were angels, man, right? Wearing very fine clothes. They stood on either side of him and beat him unmercifully. Hey, man, because we can see it, we can see it. If you can't see, as you're reading, man, you just don't have that vision, right? You have to be able to. These accounts are written for our learning, and Yahweh Shema Shai, the spirit that quickeneth, which makes us alive. And these words are alive. But this is the living waters. So you have to be able to see this, man. Right? It says, Heliodorus also saw two unusually strong and handsome young men wearing very fine clothes. They stood on either side of him and beat him unmercifully. They beat his ass, man. Hey, just like Esau is about to get his ass beat. Right? It says beat him unmercifully. Unmercifully, man. Just imagine, Edomite getting his fucking curb stomped by angels, man. That's ultimately what happened, right? It says he immediately fell to the ground unconscious. So they beat the consciousness out of him, man. Almost flatlined him, right? And his men put him on a stretcher and carried him out. And this is our power, Yahweh Shem Yahushai, man. This is our power, Yahweh Shem Yahushai. Right? I'm going to keep going. It says, only a moment earlier, this man had entered the treasury with a large group of men, including all his bodyguards. But now he was being carried away helpless. So they all openly acknowledged the mighty power of Yahweh Bahashem Yahushai. Right? It says, Heliodorus lay there unable to speak and without hope of recovery from this demonstration of the Most High's power. But the Jews praised Almighty Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai because he had miraculously protected his temple and had brought great happiness where only minutes before there had been fear and confusion. Right? And does not the scripture tell us the Lord is nigh unto them that are of a contrite heart? Right? Jake was humbled, and had fear and trusted in Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, and ultimately, the Lord showed himself, man. The power of the Lord was shown right in that moment. Right? Even though they had fear or were scared, even though it was a confusing, shaky time, so to speak, and their faith was strong because the first step of them to do was what? Pray. It wasn't to grab arms and fight them. No. They bowed down, prostrated themselves, and called upon their power. Much like what we do. And what we, Lord willing, will continue to do, man. So I just want to grab some more precepts showing forth how the Lord shows himself for his men. There's Sirach 4, Salakia. And matter of fact, Sirach 35. 35 and 14. It says, he will not despise the supplication of the fatherless, nor the widow when she poureth out her complaint. Right? And that's ultimately, the elect in the stead of the elect, right? And we're in the case of being the fatherless or the widow, so to speak. Right? It says, do not the tears run down the widow's cheek, as not her cry against him that causeth them to fall? He that serveth the Lord shall be accepted with favor, and his prayer shall reach unto the clouds. And it happened, and it will continue to happen. As the scripture says, who hath trusted in the Lord and were confounded? Who have called on him and were forsaken? Right? It says, the prayer of the humble pierceth the clouds. Until it come nigh, he will not be comforted, and will not depart till the Most High shall behold to judge righteously and execute judgment. Right? It says, for the Lord will not be slack, neither will the mighty be patient toward them, till he have smitten and sundered the loins of the unmerciful, and repaid vengeance to the heathen, till he have taken away the multitude of the proud and broken the scepter of the unrighteous, till he have rendered to every man according to his deeds, and to the works of men according to their devices, right? And that device, that intent was to destroy, to desecrate, till we have judged the cause of his people and made them to rejoice in his mercy. And that's what Jake did, right? They seen that the wicked couldn't prosper, and they rejoiced in Yahweh Bashim Rashad, man. They called upon the names of the Lord and prayed, man. You know, gave praises. Now I want to grab another precept. It's coming from the book of Psalms. (105) verse 15, and it reads, it says, saying, 14, he suffered no man to do them wrong, yea, he reproved kings for their sakes, saying, and right there it says he warned kings on their behalf. And that's what happened. You know, Heliodorius had to go back to the king empty-handed, and basically said, I ain't going back, man. You should have seen what they did to me, right? It says, saying, touch not mine anointed, and do my prophets no harm. There it is. There it is, man. So I'm gonna finish out the account. You know, I'm gonna jump down. You know, I'm gonna skip a few verses, but I'm gonna jump down and read that last part. This is This is jumping down into verse 37. When the king asked Heliodorius who would be the best man to send on the next mission to Jerusalem, hey, because the king still wanted that money, Heliodorius replied, if you have an enemy or know of someone plotting against your government, send him. He will come back badly beaten if he comes back at all. For some strange power from the Most High is at work there. The God of heaven watches over the temple. He strikes down and destroys anyone who comes to harm it. That is the story of how the temple treasury was protected from Heliodorus. So what's the difference between the Lord striking down and destroying anyone who comes to harm Jerusalem today? Who comes to harm the temple today? It's the same. So all we have to do is continue to have faith, continue to watch, and do what the Lord told us to do. He's going to do all the protecting, man. The Lord is waiting to show forth his arm. He's waiting to show forth that strength. We just have to be patient. As the scriptures say, allow patience to have her patient work, or allow patience to have her perfect work, Salakia, right? We just have to allow the Lord to do what he does, you know? So, and that's the point, you know? I just want to bring edification, you know, unto this account. Though willing, it was edifying unto the body. I want to give all praise, glory, and honor unto Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Haracha HaKodash. A double honors unto the apostles and elders of JMS Great Millstone. And a sincere shalom to Yakim, bringing out this word in diligence and in truth. Shalom.